Okay, so welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us, and welcome to Sarah Bannan from the Arts Council. Thank you for delivering this presentation on the Literature Project Award, and running through the application with us and taking questions towards the end. And I suppose just to say, people can put their questions in the chat, and we'll get to them hopefully in due course. Also say, Sarah, thanks for supporting Match in the Dark and this Ignite series of events. This has, I suppose it's given us a chance to showcase some of the more interesting projects that have been happening in literature over the last couple of year or two, and to share information so the writers and curators and producers that have been in on those conversations, I think have gained a lot from just the creative conversations and idea sharing, but also just the practicals of working out budgets and what to pay who and who to pay what, and those kinds of questions being answered and issues being shared. So it's been great. Let me see. It's also, yeah, I suppose, you know, just to say about Match in the Dark, it's myself, Brendan McEvely, and colleague and co-director Danny Gill run Match in the Dark. It's a new initiative, and generally speaking, we're interested in creating or sharing paid opportunities for writers. So anything that we can do in that regard, we do. Danny runs the Live Network, which is a collective or a grouping of 6 regional art centres that she is supporting to increase their literature programming. So essentially creating additional work for writers and creating collaborations between writers and other artists at those centres. We're also currently drafting a paying conditions document for writers, and that will set new minimum fees. That's a writer-led initiative, set minimum fees for writers based on kind of calculated on the amount of work there it takes to do jobs, rather than kind of just arbitrary figures that we've had and have been stagnating in the sector for a number of years. So we'll be kind of introducing that slowly and launching later in the year. And also this Ignite initiative, which has been focused to a large degree on the Literature Project Award, because it's, I suppose it's relatively not new, but re-entered the literature sphere, and it's a great opportunity for writers to lead on their own projects and to become curators of their own ideas and other artists and writers. And as writers, you know that the jobs and the pay can be low and the jobs can be day long and half days. So this is an opportunity. Project Award has the potential at least to pay writers more significant fees over a more sustained period of time. So it's essentially a more meaningful gig, that you as writers have your kind of hearts and minds invested in a lot more than say a particular job you might get asked to do for a day or half day. And also it's exciting to see writers become curators and to reach new audiences in new ways through new means. I think like we don't have an incredible culture of independent producers and production in literature, because I think the book is such a perfect medium for delivering literature. But myself and Danny have been doing a lot of work kind of in literature, but outside also. And the message we're getting from venue directors and arts officers and curators outside of literature is that they do want to work with writers, but they don't necessarily get the ideas, or they don't necessarily get approached with the right ideas at the right time. And so it's an education for all of us, kind of learning the life cycle of arts events and goings on in other sectors. So I think through the Ignite series we've been doing that, and hopefully through the conversations and Zoom meetings and phone calls and emails we've been having, myself and Danny, with prospective applicants to this award, we're kind of sharing information and developing a bit of a culture that will take time essentially, but kind of we're keen for you to continue to engage with us after this meeting. We're at matching.art@gmail.com. Get in touch if you have any questions. Obviously, Sarah Bannan is there from the Arts Council to, the Arts Council are great answering questions about applications. There may be questions that you feel are just too silly to ask the Arts Council and maybe embarrassed to ask. So if you want to ask us instead, but do contact Sarah with questions, and use this event as well today to do the same. So after a very long introduction, apologies, without further ado, I'll hand you over to Sarah, who's going to take you through the application form. Thanks, Sarah.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. My name is Sarah Bannan. I am the head of literature with the Arts Council. In just a second, I'm going to share my screen, and I have a PowerPoint. It is about 27 slides, but a lot of those I will whiz through really quickly, so don't get worried about that. And just as Brendan said at the beginning, feel free if you want to turn off your screen and just relax and not worry. I won't be looking to see who has theirs on and that. So I'm going to share my screen. Give me a second. Let me start my slideshow. There we go. Okay, are we good? So good afternoon. So before I kick you straight into the award itself, I want to tell you a little bit about what the Arts Council is. I know a lot of you already who are on the call, but I think it's no harm just to remember the agency to whom you may be applying and what we're all about. And I just want to put it in a bit of context. So we are hold on a second. We are the National Development Agency for the Arts in Ireland. We are guided by a 10-year strategy, which is called Making Great Artwork, and we're about to head into the last 3 years of that strategy. And at the heart of our strategy is a vision for Ireland, which is grounded in a sense of people and place where the arts are truly valued as a vital feature of our daily lives, and where ambitious and innovative artists, that's you, are supported to make work of excellence. So what does all that mean in literature? It's a picture of the Irish Writers' Centre. So our literature policy, which is up on our website, it puts the writer at the heart of the art form. But I just want to point out that I'm about to talk to you about a funding opportunity, but just to bear in mind that everything we do isn't all about direct funding to you as an individual or to you as a collective. Lots of other important ways that the Arts Council supports writers, particularly when they're starting out, but actually at all stages of their careers. We support a range of publishers and journals. We see those as a really important outlet for writers at all stages of their careers. They're all listed on our website. Newer publishers and journals tend to be funded through literature projects and then arts grant funding, and those that have been around for maybe a bit longer or seen as core are funded through strategic funding. And last year we supported 33 publishers and journals. So that's quite a lot. And I suppose just to say, one of our ambitions in the past number of years has been to support more platforms and more outlets for really high quality writing. So then we also support festivals and events. That's a little image of Writers Week Listowel, which is just on at the beginning of June. So that's supported. We support a number of festival events through strategic funding, arts grant funding, the project award for the first iteration of festivals, and through the festival investment scheme. And we support very, very small festivals and very, very large, and from the very, very niche, like focusing on maybe a genre or one particular thing, to multidisciplinary festivals. And from a literature perspective, we think these are a great mechanism for audiences to hear and meet writers, but also for writers to meet and hear from one another. And then we also support a range of resource organizations who are Poetry Ireland, the Irish Writers' Centre, Children's Books Ireland, Munster Literature Centre, Literature Ireland, and then there's a network of all those organizations called Words Ireland. And so those are really important organizations just to go to for advice and information. And then Danny and Brendan have done a lot of work with Words Ireland over the last number of years. So then just three more kind of general things to guide you. We have three kind of big policies that accompany our strategy. One is our Equality, Human Rights and Diversity policy, which was published in 2019. And just to say that that's been a really important part of the Arts Council's work over the past number of years, just trying to embed the principles of equality of access and opportunities and outcomes in everything that we do. And we're trying to do that in a thoughtful way over the course of all of our work. So, and you can go to our website and read that. Then we also have another policy called Paying the Artist, which is just what it says on the tin, is just about paying artists for their work when they are doing the work of artists. That was published in the very beginning of 2020. Just alongside that, I'm sure you guys are all excited about the Universal Basic Income pilot, or the Artist Basic Income pilot. And then I suppose there are other kind of key things that the Arts Council supports in the landscape, like the artist tax exemption. And then in everything we do, we encourage and support arts organizations to pay, and to pay appropriately when work is commissioned or made. And then the latest policy, I was going to say the latest policy that we've adopted is people, space, place, space, and people. And that's a policy framework for socio-spatial equity in the arts. So what does that mean? It just means that we have a vision for a country where everyone has the opportunity to create, engage, participate, and enjoy the arts and culture, regardless of who they are and where they live and work. So that brings us to our awards. So we have a number of awards that we run over the course of the year in every different art form. There's actually more award deadlines than there are weeks in the year. And as the National Development Agency for the Arts in Ireland, we have a focus on professional artists, and I think this grouping is made up of those. And so all of our awards are open to professional artists. So I am here to talk to you today about the Literature Project Award, which has a closing date of the 28th of July, 2022. And the first image I have up there is from Danny's fabulous project, the Lighthouse Project, which she received funding for in late 2020. So what is the Literature Project Award? It supports projects that connect literature with readers and audiences. And then it also supports projects that allow writers and illustrators to research, develop, and create work, and this is the critical bit, in new and innovative ways. Now, projects can do both of those things, or they can do one or the other. And you can apply for up to €30,000. The image I have there is just a little promo for Martina Devlin's City of Books, which is something that got project funding back in 2021. So we have a long list. This is all on the in the guidelines, which I'm sure you've all read extensively before coming to this session anyway, but we list all the things that you could think of applying for. And Brendan mentioned at the beginning, this is a new award for literature. So I suppose we were just keen to give people ideas for what they could apply for. So you could apply for a traditional publication, a digital publication, a digital presentation, a traditional presentation, live literary and storytelling events, reading, talks, recording, podcasts, reader development projects, workshops, residencies, spoken word, live literature, experimental writing projects or practices, collaborative research and development, innovative presentations, and then anything that we haven't mentioned there. So everything that goes back to it's about connecting audiences with literature, or writers working in new and unusual kind of way, or experimental kind of ways. So we try to make it as open and flexible as possible. So just to say, what's distinct about the project award from our other awards is that it's about for discrete activities and outcomes rather than a series of events over the course of the year. So a literature project should have a defined beginning and an end. So like you want to start something and end something. Now, you could be starting and ending the development of a project or the research phase of a project, but you have a beginning and an end. This isn't for your ongoing work of maybe a journal or a publishing house. Ongoing activities can be supported through a number of other Arts Council funding programs. And then if you're a writer who's working on your own, or just maybe you want to work with just a mentor, the Literature Bursary Award is the thing for you. But if you're wanting to work with a whole group of writers, maybe you want to do a collaborative novel or a series of short stories, or you want to work with artists from other disciplines, then the Project Award would be the place for you. There's two images up here. One is from Shelf Marks, which is a podcast that Zoe Commons developed with Project Award. And then the other image I have up there is Tolka. So people will know this is a relatively new journal. But the very first iteration of Tolka, which is a creative nonfiction journal, was funded through the Project Award. So one of the editors applied as an individual artist to see how this would go. And they got funding for one issue under the Project Award. And then they kind of reflected on how they went, how that first issue went. And then they came back to the Arts Council the following year and applied for arts grant funding, which is where kind of ongoing funding takes place. So if you're kind of a brand new initiative, you think projects is a great place to kind of test the waters and see how things work. And usually people learn a lot. And I know in the case of Tolka, they felt that they learned a lot in the very first iteration of the journal about, how they would pay people, how they would run things, and so on. So in all of our awards for literature, we are defined by what our definition of literature is. Now, this isn't, it may not be the definition of literature that you would use, but we have to have something to kind of work within. So For the purpose of this award, we define literature as prose fiction, poetry, creative nonfiction, graphic novels, children's fiction and poetry, illustrated picture books, literary criticism, and contemporary literary biography and autobiography. So it excludes everything that's outside of that, including screenwriting, journalism, playwriting, which actually goes over to our theater team, religious writing, instructional writing, academic writing, cookery, all those things fall outside of our remit. So again, maybe some of the people on the call think this is really obvious, but you'd be surprised. So this is what this is how we've outlined it. Sorry. So who can apply? So it's open to professional artists, to groups of artists, and organizations working in literature. So you have to be resident in the Republic of Ireland to apply. Now there are some exceptions that's listed in the website, and you can talk to us about that if you're not based here. And then we define, as I said at the beginning, a professional artist is an individual who identifies themselves and is recognized by their peers as a professional practicing artist. So potential applicants for the award could include groups of writers, publishers, journals, festivals, art centers, libraries, bookshops, or an individual writer on their own. So this is another image from a project that Duffy Mooney Shepherd received funding for in 2021. It's a collaborative project between herself and the folklorist Michael Fortune and a filmmaker, and they worked in a number of schools in Dublin. So who can't apply? So obviously this is a longer list, apologies. So organizations who are currently in receipt of Arts Council funding under the other programs like strategic funding, Art Centre funding, partnership funding. So involvement of such organizations or partners is welcome. Individuals who work on an ongoing basis with organizations who are funded through any of the above. So organizations or individuals who've already submitted an application for 2023 arts grant funding. If you're a member of a the Council of National Cultural Institutions, that's like the Abbey, the National Gallery, or you're directly funded by the Department of Tourism, Arts, etc. Individuals or organizations who don't have a demonstrable track record as professional artists or organizations, individuals currently in undergraduate education, those who are seeking support towards fees, and you can't apply for the award both as an individual and as part of an organization. So Brendan can't make an application as Brendan McEvely as an individual and then also make an application as part of the dark. Just see a question up here. Let's see what we say. Oh, has anyone else lost sound? Brendan, have you lost sound? Okay. You're on mute, Brendan, so I can't hear you.
The sound is coming through okay for me, a little.
Okay.
Just every now and then, but.
Okay, well, I'll keep going, and I was going to say I'll speak up, but hopefully I'll stand closer. Sorry, hold on a second. So what can you apply for? You can apply for up to €30,000. We also will give, we have the option to give additional funding to cover costs that are specifically related to making of work by artists with disabilities. So, you know, that can have additional costs. When you're applying within the application form, you have to submit a detailed budget listing all the items of income and expenditure. The maximum amount you request has to be the difference between the expenditure and the income. That's kind of self-explanatory, I hope. And the expenditure should include all of your fees, wages, technical costs, administrative costs, etc. And proposed income should include what you expect to receive from other funders, or if you have like sales or box office, etc. And so what can't you apply for? So you can't apply for both a literature project award and a theater project award in the same round. You just have to choose one art form in the round. You can't apply for a major capital purchase, but I think the funding limit on this kind of excludes that anyway. Ongoing core costs, but that kind of goes with the idea of the award. Things that are more suited to another funding program for the Arts Council, like so if it is more like a bursary, or if it is more like arts grant funding, but you can talk to us about that if you're a little unsure, or if it's something that is better funded by another organization like Culture Ireland. And that's just so people who don't know, Culture Ireland is concerned with the promotion of the arts, the Irish arts abroad. So something that often comes up in literature is people want to attend international book fairs or give readings abroad. That isn't us, that's Culture Ireland. You can't apply for things that have already taken place. And this is kind of, this project award is about things that are happening in 2023. So it's about giving you plenty of time to put this in place. But if you've already started, the project will have started in this year, then no. And then this is a kind of a standard for the Arts Council, but things that are for charity, fundraising purposes, competitions, or primarily for profit making. And then things that have already been assessed by the Arts Council. So you can't submit the exact same proposal twice. So you do your application. So you read the guidelines really, really carefully, and then you start your application, which just asks you some very basic questions about who you are, what you want to do, who's involved, and you fill out the application form. And you're like, that's fantastic, I'm done. But you're not done, because you have to have your application form and your supporting material. And this is really important. And this is something that we often have to make applications ineligible because people leave out these critical supports. So you do your application form, and then you have to give us CVs. This is all in the guidelines, so don't worry, you don't have that. You can watch me do this, but the most important thing is to read the guidelines. CVs for yourself and then anyone else who's involved in the project. And the CV can be up to 3 pages, each individual one. It can be shorter than that though too. And it's a relevant artistic CV. It's not everything you've ever done, so it's about your artistic work. Then you have to put in a detailed budget, and that is separate from and in addition to the budgetary information that's in the application form. So a lot of people think, well, I did all that in the application form, I gave all the budget, but no, you need to give us a much more detailed account of the spending. And the budget should include the proposed rates of pay for all the personnel who are involved. And then just as back in line with that other policy I mentioned before, the rates of pay should be realistic and can measure it with practitioners' level of professional experience. So you may ask me, well, Sarah, like what should that be? And we will say to you, you need to determine that yourself. That shows that you're a professional working in the field. There are a lot of organizations, Match in the Dark are doing some work on this at the moment, but also those resource organizations that I mentioned earlier will be able to give you some advice about how you should pitch things. But you should also be talking to the artists involved and making sure that what you're, as Brendan said really eloquently at the beginning, making sure that what you're paying people is to measure it with the work that they're putting in, not based on what you heard someone got paid or what you think the lowest common denominator is. So supporting material continued. So there's more. So you've done all those. Then you also need to have samples that demonstrate your previous work, which is relevant to the proposed project. So you can do up to 5 of those. And I have an asterisk there because in the guidelines, there's a detailed listing of the kinds of things that we'd like to see as samples of work. And then if you're working with other people for your application or as part of your project, we will want to see letters or emails of support and or copies of MOUs, that's Memorandum of Understandings, outlines the details of the collaborations and confirms commitments of income. So if they're going to give you money, they need to show that they're planning to do that. So that's if you're working with others. And that, like, the reason for that is to give us a sense that, like, okay, they've talked to these people, this will actually happen. In cases where the project proposal has a public outcome, a marketing and or dissemination and engagement plan that outlines who the work is for and how they will be enabled and encouraged to engage with it is required. So if you're dealing with the public, we need some kind of plan that's about who is this for and how are you going to get to them. So some key points to remember. You must be registered for an Arts Council OLS account. You need to do that kind of sooner rather than later. If you want to apply, it can take up to 5 days to get for a new person to be registered. Start early. We get most of our queries from people because they've started quite late in the day and get very stressed. And we always tell people to try to upload about 48 hours before the advertised deadline. That way, if you encounter a technical problem, you have time to contact us so we can help you. And then just on account of large volume applications, if you contact us after 2 p.m. on the closing date, we can't guarantee that we'll be able to resolve your problem ahead of time. So the contacts are all here. These are all on our website. There's myself. I'm the head of literature. I work with Audrey Keane, who's the support manager. Audrey is half-time, just so you know. Aoife is also half-time. And then Steffi Kelly is full-time, but also works across a whole bunch of other art forms as well. So we're a teensy-weensy little team, but we endeavor to get back to people as quickly as possible. that's that part. There's one other thing I wanted to talk to you about, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the assessment, if that's okay, or I don't know if people want to ask questions now, and then I can tell you how the applications are assessed. What do you think, Brendan?
I think maybe talk us through the assessment phase.
Okay, I'm going to stop the sharing now here. I don't have slides on this. Again, this is all in the guidelines, but once the applications come into us in the Arts Council, we do an eligibility check, and we make sure that all of the supporting materials are there, that you haven't applied for too much or too little with it, or too much. If you apply over the amount, then your application is made ineligible. So we do all those initial checks. And then the applications go to the literature advisor. So we have 2 literature advisors, one who looks at the English language literature and one who looks at Irish language literature. And they are, at the moment, Peter Sir and Declan Hughes, but then they also work with subcontractors. They work with other assessors just because of the volumes of applications that we have. And they sometimes bring people in for these assessments because they feel like, oh, we don't have enough expertise in area, or like maybe we need another poet, or we need someone who can kind of really look at illustrated picture books. They bring on other expertise there. They do an initial assessment of the applications based on the criteria, which are the artistic quality, and that is based on both the proposal as you set out in the application form, but then also the support. So particularly those samples of work that are relevant. So they look at that. Then the next criteria is the award objectives and priorities. So how well it fits those award objectives. So remember, those were, connecting literature with audiences, or writers or illustrators working in new and innovative kind of ways. So how well do they fit those priorities? And then feasibility. So if you've been to one of these talks about the bursary award, the feasibility is usually not such a big part of it, but it is in the project award. So this is like, are the budgets realistic? Crucially, are you paying the artist or yourself appropriately and well? How does it stack up? Could you actually pull this thing off? So then, and then finally, it's the conclusion, which also takes into account the competitive context. So the application may be very good, but it may be in a context of like really excellent applications. So in another round, so they kind of look at all the applications up against each other. So then the shortlisted applications go to a peer panel. So we have a very long list of people who have agreed to be part of the Arts Council's peer panels across a range of art forms. For the Literature Project Award, depending on the kinds of applications that we get, we try to get a panel that kind of matches the types of applications we have. So for a literature bursary panel, it's usually, a novelist or someone who works in prose fiction, a poet, a children's writer and illustrator, and then maybe someone who's kind of a editor or, has a kind of a catch-all. And we usually try to make sure one of those people is international. For the project award, it kind of depends. So we've had to have people on who have maybe expertise in like podcasting, or people who know about music, if there's a lot of music across them. But we tried to, literature is obviously like the common denominator across all that, but they're practitioners, so that they're artists like yourself who are assessing the applications. And they go through each of the applications in turn, discuss them. I'm there just to take us through to guide them through the award, but it's chaired by a member of the council. They go through each of the applications, they make a brief comment about each one in the context of the criteria, and then following that, they score the applications. And there are 4 scores that can be given. A is must fund, B is should fund, C is could fund, and D is not a priority. Each of those letters has a number. Everything goes up on a big Excel sheet, and then we kind of we get a total score, and we look at how well things scored, and then we try to award money until it runs out. And in the past number of rounds, we've been able to fund over half of the applications that we received for the Literature Project Award. So then we write to everybody and let them know the outcome of it. Either way, if you've received funding or if you haven't received funding, we encourage people to ask us for a copy of their written assessment, just a summary of how the application is done. And then we're happy to talk to people through any concerns they might have. And that's how it works. That's my, sorry, it's like 30 minutes of me just talking nonstop. I know I talk really quickly, so I'm sorry. So do people, I don't know if people want to put on their screens or ask questions, or if there are things that have come into you, Brendan, Danny, that you want me to cover.
Yeah, so do please put questions either in the chat, or feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself if you'd like to ask something. I might just pose a question to you, Sarah, that's come into us from a lot of people I know. I think it was on Brendan's list, and that is around the cross-art form collaborations, if people are submitting applications where music or dance or visual art is part of the application, how do they need to consider that specifically, maybe in supporting documentation? Is it enough CVs and a good outline, or should they also be considering submitting links or references from that artist? To what degree do they need to kind of verify that aspect?
Yeah, so the way it works is, so you'd so say you have a project that has, you know, it's writer led, but you're going to be working with a dancer and a musician. So you just, from a very practical point of view, you tick literature, and then you also tick music and or literature. You part of the literature project award, and then it says supplementary art forms, and you'll tick dance and music. We then, the application comes into ourselves, and literature is like the primary assessment. So the literature team will do the primary assessment of it, but then it will also go for what we call secondary assessments. So we will send the application off to the dance team and also to the music team, and they will come back with an assessment, which will be shorter. They'll only do it across like the kind of the artistic quality, not the whole shebang, unless they think it's totally relevant. And I will say a lot of times what comes back with those, if the application isn't particularly well developed, is, yeah, this person has a great track record by the CV, but there's not much to go on. I'm not really sure what they're going to be doing. So I think that's a really good question. And I think where possible, if it is multidisciplinary, and if you are going to be working in other art forms, to give an example of the artistic practice of the various people involved is really important. I mean, you absolutely have to have the CVs. How you want to address the works in, or the kind of the samples of work, is up to yourselves, but you want to have enough for an assessor to go on to say, oh, this is very interesting, or this is, I can see how this will work.
Sarah, is in addition to the comment that comes in from other art forms, did they also make a recommendation on the score, or is it ultimately the literature team?
So they will say if they think it's a priority from their art form for shortlisting. Usually we have kind of broad agreement across the art forms. That can occasionally happen that we might think something is like super duper, and in whatever art forms they'll think like this is like, it's not brilliant from this perspective, but then we will, as literature, will override them, and it can work the other way as well, where we'd say like, actually just like the writing isn't strong enough, or the kind of literary part isn't, like, this is a really great musician, but we don't really see it as a priority from ours. So yeah, we get those literature gets the final call, but 9 times out of 10 there's kind of broad agreement among them. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Sorry, sir, we finished?
Oh, I was going to I don't know if you want me to take the questions in the
Yeah, you
chat.
can answer them directly, or I can read them out and you can answer
them. I'd
them.
love it if you read them out.
Okay,
Danny.
I will read them out. So Liz Bannan, Liz is asking, what are the exceptions to the residency rule being in the Republic? Are Northern Irish writers or North-South collaborations excluded?
No, they're not excluded. So what the guidance says, like, I'm not going to get this exactly right, what the guidelines say. There are exceptions to, so as I say, the rule is that you have to be residents of the Republic of Ireland. We will make an exception if the applicant gets in touch with us ahead of time and is able to demonstrate to us, or kind of outline the way in which they believe the application or the proposal will have positive impacts on the arts or artists working in the Republic of Ireland. So that's fairly broad. And so we deal with it on a case-by-case basis. So yeah, if they want to get in touch with us directly, we can give a steer.
Okay, thanks. This is Laura Harvey Graham. I edit a journal and we're 3 issues in already. Each issue is a different theme, different contributors, etc. Is this funding suitable for an existing self-funded journal, or only for a new journal?
Yeah, no, I think the project award would be a good place to start for funding, just being practically speaking, because you've missed the the other deadline. But I do think, yeah, it's not the first of the journal, but if you want funding for a issue, apply to the project award and see, we can see how you do. And then sometimes people use that as a stepping stone for other funding. sometimes people, you know, decide they don't want to continue getting funding from the Arts Council, or, you know, any number of things, you know. But yeah, no, certainly we'd love to see something like that come through.
Okay. This is from Patrick Holloway. In terms of a literary journal, should the project award be used only for one issue, or if there is a plan to have 2 issues in a year, can it be used for both?
It could, yeah, I think it could be used for both. I mean, it's not much, it's not a huge fund, but yeah, it could be used for the 2 in the 1 year. So long as you're kind of, you know, as I say, it's like, I suppose each issue has a beginning and an end, and there's no guarantee. There's no guarantee with arts grant funding, even that the funding will continue year on year in any case. But the idea, and actually when I think about it, I must think back to Tolka, but I can't actually recall if we funded 1 issue or if it was 2. But yeah, no, I think that would be fine. And it could be up to a panel as well, Patrick, if they decide, you know, look, like the costs are too much, or like this is too little, or what, you know, they could say, actually, we'll fund 1 issue in the year. So they could make a decision like that. But yeah. Yes, you can. Yeah, so you can do either way.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. A question around MOUs from Sarah Sturzel. It's about the nature of the MOUs being sought for a project. What is the expectation for these? Is an email or a letter sufficient from someone on the team of a partner organization to say they're willing to collaborate, or do they need more?
No, an email is sufficient. I mean, what we're looking, yeah, you're looking just for some evidence that like there is actually a relationship there, you know, so that's what's required.
Okay. From Sive, should you apply in Irish or English language for a project in the Irish language?
Oh, if you're applying in the Irish language, if like it's for an Irish language literature project, I would apply in Irish, and we have like we can have the entire project assessed through the medium of Irish, you know what I mean? And we do separate panels for that as well. So yeah, I would do that. It's up to yourself. I mean, it is up to yourself side though too. Some people, yeah, but if you're dealing with an all Irish panel, they tend to they don't I'm sure you can imagine them. They're just like, why have they applied in English if this is all in? So yeah, but either way.
Okay. This is from Juliet. If the project involves 2 art forms and is designed to happen in a primary school, would that be better suited to YPCE strand of the award?
I would need to get back to you, Juliet, on that, because I need to refresh myself on the YPCE project award, because there's going to be quite specific. So that, can you leave that one with me?
Yeah,
Juliet,
and maybe Juliet might be worth sending a direct note to Sarah on that one then for clarity.
Yeah, actually just a little bit more detail about it, and then I can share it then with Shona, who's the head of young people, children and education, and we can decide. And I will say the other thing that happens is, and they have different requirements for like what they'll, so you want to know from the outset. Yeah.
Okay. And Lauren O'Donovan, so yeah, just clarifying around this idea of journals, I suppose, and eligibility. If there's a first issue of a journal coming out this autumn, so autumn 2022, does that disqualify that from applying for the grant?
No.
Okay.
No, and it's just, I mean, there's like, without contradicting myself, like there's a certain amount of overlap between all the Arts Council's awards, and the idea with the project award is really, it's to give people a chance to test things out. And like Danny and Brendan can attest, because they've applied for arts grant funding before, like that is a much more cumbersome application process than the project award. So it is meant to be kind of a dipping your toe in and seeing what you can do with the funding, and then trying to learn something from it as well.
Okay, if there are other questions that you want to put into the chat, do please enter them there. Brendan, we might look at the short list of main questions that were coming to us from people recently. Some of them have already been mentioned, but if there's 1 or 2 that have not been answered, maybe you'll pose those.
Yeah, sure. So I suppose one is around at the first Ignite series session. Audrey mentioned that the Arts Council is kind of interested in, you know, applications that had a strong audience focus or a readership development focus. Now, I guess the question is, obviously you're open to other ideas or issues that are, you know, other applications that are maybe, as you say, development or research. But I suppose just in terms of giving evidence of audience focus, marketing plans, things like that, what makes for a good application, or what do you want to see in an application when it comes to showing?
Without being too vague about it, like what we want to see is that the applicant has a sense of who their audience is, and a real plan of how they're going to go about working with them. And if they don't know who their audience is, that they're going to use the project as a way to discover who that is. So, you know, I mean, this is once-off funding. We tend to get more. A lot of the applications tend to be for maybe more writer-led projects that are more about writers developing their work. But then some of the really interesting things that came through in the past, I say, were like the Martina Devlin, like that was just, you know, a podcast series. And so obviously that's a way of, like, you know, engaging with a different audience. Zoe's was another podcast series there. There were a number of digital ones there. And what they all had in common was that they were very kind of, I suppose, focused on what one had a sense that the idea came first, and that and it was a good fit for the project award, rather than retrofitting an idea to fit in with the rather than trying to retrofit the idea to suit the project award, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like it's as simple as having a sense of who that audience is, and a real plan for how you reach them.
Okay, we've talked a lot as well over the series about the benefits of partnering with other organizations, and you mentioned podcasts there. It's a good example of, you know, rather than, if you're not an expert in podcast production and editing, hooking up with someone that has a pre-existing podcast, does partnering with organizations or people who have expertise kind of have a significant impact on the application from your point of view?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, like, we were actually, before we got on the call, we were talking about, I suppose one of the things in every art form that is the case is that because the arts has been so underfunded for so long, and because things are, you know, in some ways in an early stage, a lot of people are working on their own or in isolation. And I suppose I'm in a really privileged position in that I see all the applications coming in and all the ideas come in. You see a lot of overlap, or you see a lot of people doing something that someone else is doing, or perhaps the Arts Council is funding someone to do that already. And you think, oh God, if only they could, you know, work with someone who's doing this, that we'd get a lot more out of it. And, you know, writers would get more, audiences get more. So that's why, I suppose, when doing the presentation at the beginning, I put up all those what people might find the duller end of the presentation, or maybe find the whole thing dull, but you know what I mean, the less relevant part of the, you might think it's less relevant the first half, but it's just to remind people that there is like an ecosystem there, and that we are, you know, trying our very best to get people to work together. So yeah, the more saying that, though, we want to make sure that the organizations, particularly if they're funded organizations, we want to make sure that they're giving something to the projects too, and that they're really putting their resources behind it, rather than, and that's where the MOUs and the emails come in. We do often get applications that seem maybe slightly cynical from the organization's point of view, where they've, you know, thrown in a letter of support, but you guys kind of get the sense that they're not really going to put the backing behind it. So we're looking to support applications where there's a genuine partnership and a genuine relationship among all of those, and particularly where organizations are putting money behind something that shows that they're actually serious about it. You know, like, there's no skin off anyone's nose to send an email saying, yeah, that sounds great, but actually if they're willing to put some money behind it, that makes a big difference.
Great. And then just talking about the kind of some applications will have, you know, we're producing an event or producing a publication, and it will have an audience. It will come to fruition over the course of 2023, whereas others are maybe more, as you say, developmental or research. You're trialing something out and the audience may be smaller or nil. Does that impact
okay.
on your point of view? Like,
Yeah,
oh, is this really worth it? Or
yeah, no, I mean, they're all, like, it's, and I mean, kind of everything is up for, all of that is open. I mean, I suppose what depends on it are the kind of the quality of the applications we receive and how compelling an idea is and how, you know, but yeah, the development of something is, you know, is equally valid, particularly if it, you know, yeah. So no, yeah, they're all equally valid, but in a given round, you know, not everything will be funded, and you know, there might be a round where we fund more kind of developmental initiatives, and then there might be another that is more about outcome, just depending on the quality of the submissions.
I think, are there any other questions come in, or Danny, have you any thoughts or questions?
There aren't any other questions in the chat there at the moment, and Juliet put in one, but Sarah answered it. On timeline, Sarah, I suppose, is there anything you can say on when people should potentially expect to hear the outcome?
Okay, I don't have that today, but it's usually the closing date is late July, and I'd say the panels would be in mid-September, so it'd be October when people would receive the news, I'd say.
Okay.
But when you get your letter of acknowledgement, we'll give the project plan, as it were, will be published at that stage, and we'll know probably usually down to the week when we'll be giving out the decisions.
Okay. Brendan, is that everything on your list? Yeah.
Yeah, just going to reiterate for people to get in touch with us. You know, if you just want to, your idea, if you're sharing it, will be in complete confidence. And I guess myself and Danny are here just to help you connect with, you know, to think through your application with you or your idea with you, and ask, are there, you know, are there any other partners or people who can help you, or people who can boost the quality of the application? If you have questions on budget or anything at all, you know, feel free to get in touch. And equally there, yeah.
Lainey has a question here, and she just says, can anyone help apply for a grant who can use the kind of language that's being used here, as my brain doesn't work that way? So you don't need to use any kind of particular, like, I know that maybe the way we're talking now can be, or maybe the way I'm talking can be off-putting, but really, like, the ideas that have been funded before are usually pretty simple, and they usually are pretty straightforward. So I want to publish a journal, I want to put on a few readings, I want to work with another writer to, you know, to put together a collection of short stories, and we're going to do it on Zoom, or like they are, we do try to make them, we try to make them as straightforward as possible, and the decisions are made by, you know, practicing, like our advisors are writers themselves. Yeah, I think I think, yeah, I'm sure Declan, or sorry, I'm sure Brendan and Danny can give you some advice, but I would warn against trying to change into any kind of art speak, because we really are not looking for that.
Yeah, and I would say, you know, the Literature Project Award is definitely a lot less onerous than other Arts Council applications. I think it is quite straightforward in its form, which is helpful. But Lanny and anyone else who might be on this call who may not have already connected with Brendan or I directly, you can reach us at matchinthedark@gmail.com, and we have actually had a number of kind of half-hour Zoom one-to-ones with different people in the last few weeks who are considering this award, and all those conversations have just been very focused on what people are coming up with, their ideas, any kind of questions or things that we can answer, or any kind of advice that we can give. We're more than happy to share, but you can use us as a sounding board. Some people have really practical questions about budget and stuff like that. Other people have questions around the kernel of the idea and, you know, kind of creative artist type questions. So we are willing to receive those, and it's matchinthedark@gmail.com. So do drop us a line if there are specific things that we can help with. We're more than happy to. There are two other questions in the chat here. One from Patrick, again, relating to a journal. Would the support or sample of work be our own writing? I'm assuming in that context, Patrick, you mean the writing of the editorial board, or do you mean submissions? You might unmute yourself to clarify.
No, Sarah was talking about the extra documents that we have to attach, and one of them was about sample of work. And I was thinking for the literary journal, would, like, as for the 4 editors, we're all writers, would we put in our own writing, or?
Yeah, and I think maybe your own writing, and then I think perhaps there wouldn't be a sample of work, but, you know, I think for a new journal, you know, to kind of like almost like a manifesto or something, you know what I mean? Like kind of like, this is what we're at, this is going to be the submission guidelines, this is how we're going to do, you know, this is our policy on who we're going to, like how we're going to select, and, you know, those kind of things. I would use the space for that. And I think, yeah, samples of your own work, but then I think also to you know, document about how, you know, how you're going to select the pieces, how you're going to call for them, what the, you know, what the purpose of the journal is, what makes it different from other journals that are around already.
I think also if you have an issue already out, Patch, which I think is part of your plan, then
Yeah,
the writing
yeah.
that's in that, I mean, you
Perfect.
can attach the PDF.
Oh, you can attach it. You can attach, like, so if if you've the if you have an issue already, then attach that. Do you know what I mean? And or if you have a kind of a sample of what you're doing,
okay,
put
perfect.
that in. Yeah.
Great,
Okay.
thanks, Emil.
I see.
Sorry. Yeah, there's one from Bryony here, and it's a good question actually, because I suppose we have been answering this, I think, within some of our one-to-ones. If another form, e.g. a podcast, is being used, what qualifies a project to be literature, or the right role for writers to have? Is being a writer enough, or do writers need to be showcasing their own work? So for instance, writers who are going for a literature project award, possibly as producers or creatives on a project that is still literary orientated, if it's not directly related to their own work, is that seen as a negative?
No, that's fine. I mean, I get, like, we're not like I mean, yeah, we're like, there's the Broadcasting Commission if you just want to do podcasts on kind of other, like a non-fiction kind, you know, about, like, I'm trying to think, you know, boating, or I don't know, something. But if it's, you know, if it's literary in some kind of nature, whether it's like storytelling or whether it's about other writers or about, you know, then that constitutes, like, a podcast in itself isn't like a literary form. So it's, yeah, it would need to have some connection with, like, the world of literature for it to be funded. It doesn't matter if it's not about your own work as a writer, but it would need to be connected to literature in some way. And that could be a myriad of different ways.
Okay.
Maybe just worth saying a kind of connected point, whether you're the curator, producer, and it's not about publishing your work, for example, a journal, it's about publishing someone else's work, or whether the project involves you getting your work out there in collaboration with other writers or artists or whatever it is. I think either way, probably recognize that of anyone on the project, you will be doing the most work involved, you know. So some people have asked, should I be paying myself? That's sort of the point of the award, or part of the point of the award, is that there is a budget in for the work that you're going to do, whether or not you're an artist, as it were, on the application, or just a producer. Either way, there's, and if you're a producer and also an artist, then there may be a production fee or an artist fee. And I think the budgets that I've seen that were most compelling from people we've been in touch with were ones where the producer broke down their work. So in the budget, it wasn't just producer X, you know, 100 or 1,000. It was, this aspect of the job will take this much time, therefore the fee is this. And I don't know if that's the case, Sarah, if you'd like to see, like, in the detailed budget, if someone is putting it down that they're a producer or a curator, that you want to see what the work will actually involve and how they see them spending their time.
Yeah, I mean, the more detail when it comes to budgets, really the better, without being like ludicrous about it. But yeah, I mean, I think and for yourself, yeah, Jack, I mean, Brendan, you're right that like the feature to the lead artist is important, but what's also important is like a kind of a balance across the whole, you know, the whole proposal.
Okay. Well, I think we've been really time efficient. It's 1:55 and we seem to have covered a lot of ground, but lots of people saying in the chat that this has been very useful, and thank you, Sarah, for the presentation and for your time today to share here, and thank you everyone for coming, and as previously mentioned, very happy to receive further queries, or as you may now realize from this session, there might be specific questions that you may need confirmation or clarity on from Sarah or a member of her team, so do contact them directly for that. But Sarah, thank you.
Thanks a million. Okay,
Cheers.
thanks guys.
Thanks for joining, everyone.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.